Well, welcome to my Aleko chicken run or chicken coop review and, more to the point, step-by-step assembly guide. These are the 3 chickens I've got. We got the Aleko coop to provide like a secondary level of protection, having had a minor incident with a mountain lion. My little girls are coming over to see me. Anyway, in this video I'm going to show you exactly what you get for your money with the Aleko chicken coop and exactly how one person on their own can assemble it. Although I will say you will need somebody to give you a hand when attaching the wire to the unit. Any questions you've got on the Aleko coop, then far away. And I got this to keep my 3 little chickens safe, give them a little bit more room outside of their coop to run around in, and they absolutely seem to love it. Well, welcome to my Aleko chicken coop assembly. Now, this obviously isn't the Aleko chicken coop. This is my Vituvin chicken coop with my 3 little birds inside here. The problem that I've got is the other day had a big bobcat, mountain lion, something like that, circling around the tent, jumping on this fence over here. I didn't actually see it, so I wasn't quite sure what it was, but it convinced me enough that we need to get something else to go over the top to keep my little babies safe. So I've got the Aleko chicken coop to go over the top, which will also give the birds a little bit more freedom when we do it, if we do want to let them out of the main coop. What do we get for our money with the Aleko chicken coop? Well, all this, it comes self-assembly in one long, large, flat box. The box is too heavy, I would say, for 2 people to lift on their own. I'm going to be assembling this on my own. I like to do all these jobs just to show whether one person can do it. If at any point you need 2 people to assemble anything in this video, I will tell you. But I try to do everything, do workarounds to show you exactly how one person, single parent on their own, could put this thing together. Anyway, the first thing to do, lay all this lot out on the floor, see just what we've got for our money. Okay, so this is what we get for our money with the Aleko chicken coop. Every part is labelled. The one thing I would say is the labels on some of them are missing or non-existent on there, which is a slight thing I would raise with the manufacturer and saying make the labels more clearer. That's skimping on money to put cheap labels on that get rubbed off. But anyway, I put them in alphabetical order and I would suggest you do the same. So those are your A poles, those are your B poles, those are your C poles, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, etc. on there. Laid all the joining brackets out along the top, and we have this little bag which has got all of our bolts in here, so it's time to empty that out. As I say, you can check it off against the instructions to make sure you've got everything that you should have before commencing the work, which I would probably recommend that you do. Is way at the back, and if you want to double check you've got everything, what you can do is go through with a pen and tick off everything on this list of parts here to make sure you've got everything, nothing is missing. I would recommend doing that if you're, particularly if you're nervous over doing a job like this, to make sure nothing's missing, because one wrong part or misjoin could mean you might not be able to assemble the whole thing. But fingers crossed, should all go together. Now, my chicken coop is way at the back over there, so what I have to do is assemble each side down here on the drive, or the base of the frame certainly on it, before moving it part by part to the back there, because I've got no way to assemble it here, because whilst 2 people could probably lift the thing, if I assembled it here, me and my wife, there is no way, I've not got a clear path through to get it down to there. So I'm going to assemble it as much as I can here, transport it to the back, and assemble the rest over the top of the coop. Anyway, let's take a look at the instructions, see what we've got to do. Step number 2. Assemble coop on a level surface and connect the bottom frame. Gather 2 A tubes, 4 B tubes, and 2 K connectors. That's my 2 K. Let's shift this stuff to the side. That's my 2 K connectors. Need 4 M connectors, which are these 4 here. 2 A tubes. If in doubt and any of the markings are missing, put them side by side to make sure they're exactly the same. Do be aware though, a lot of these poles look identical. Like the A tubes here look very, very similar to the F tubes, but you note the F tube only has an indentation, a linkage at one end, not the other end. The A tube has them at both ends. So we need 2 of the A tubes, 4 B tubes, which is these ones here. So that's all we need for the first part. 2 A tubes, 4 B tubes, 2 flat K connectors, and 4 M connectors, and simply push this together, as I will show you in just a second, all being well. Well, first of all, let me get the A tubes in place. These connectors, simply push down like that with your thumb, slide into place, and then pops through, and that tube is locked in place there. Now we're going to do the same with the other end. Do pay attention as to which way the joint is pointing. But the one nice thing being about these is if you get it wrong, you can simply squeeze them apart again. Make sure that's gone through on both sides. That's the first part, and the whole thing is 6 foot wide, 6.5 foot wide, 6.5 foot high, and 10.5 foot long. Anyway, do the next one. Simply squeeze down again, locks in both sides on there. Again, pay attention to the orientation. What I mean is you don't want to fit it on like that, being the opposite way. They need to be going round as though you're fitting them on the corners, like that. So, that is the two ends of the frame made. Let me get it into a bigger area. Okay, so give myself a bit of space for assembling the core area of the frame. Now take the B tubes. You're going to fit one exactly the same inside of the K section here, and just squeeze these in with your thumbs and fingers. Keep it straight on there. Locked one in. Another one the other end. You don't have to pay particular attention obviously to the orientation on these side parts. Squeeze in again, and that is one section done, which will marry up in just a second. So you can see it's already coming together quite quickly. I'll quote a time, what I estimate at the end of the video, for how long it will take to assemble on your own. Is that one in? Seems reasonably well made, he says. Yeah, let's lock both of those in. Placing this one down. You can now see what I meant about the orientation of these. Little care to be taken on the ends. Again, squeeze in. It can show just a little bit stiffer there. Lock through on both sides there. Now for the next one. Now, so far I've not found anything I've not been able to do on my own. So it's flying together. Sure, it will not go as smoothly as this the entire way. Bit of, to use that Richie term, wiggling and jiggling required on some of these parts. Whole frame, base of the frame, is, yeah, that's what you need the hammer for. Okay, so there we are. That is the base of the chicken coop. My only thought is, on this immediately is, you've got a gap here where creatures could get underneath. Not chickens get out, but things tunnel underneath. So I'm intrigued as to how far down the wire comes, or as to whether we're going to need to put something right the way around the outside of this. So that's my, I'm sure more will become apparent as we go on through the instructions. And the next step is to gather 4 of these C tubes and put them into the connections on the end there. Now I like to keep all my videos child friendly. I don't swear a lot. If I do, I edit it out on the camera. There aren't 4 C tubes there were just 3 C tubes. The box was broken open where the carrier had thrown it over my gate in not too impressive style, I wouldn't say, but that's not down to Aleko at all on here. Underneath the box I managed to find the 4th C tube, so we are in business. But I was thinking there was one missing, and the air was about to turn very child unfriendly in terms of language used. Now at this stage I am going to lift the frame over the top of the coop, shift the coop around to where I want it to be, so we can get this thing in place from the start. Because I'm not, I thought maybe I could build up 4 sides, all 4 sides, then put the thing together, but you build it from the bottom upwards on that. So need to get my wife, because this is going to be a 2-person job. It would be a 1-person job if I'd built it in place around the coop. So you don't necessarily need 2 people. Just I am going to do today purely because of where I built it up on the drive, although I suspect I could lift this on my own. Well, me and my wife have lifted the base frame into place. It's actually, well, the whole thing weighs a lot of weight. This frame is super lightweight. Were it not for its bulky size, 1 person could lift this easily on their own. And obviously the problem would be alleviated if you'd built it around the coop in the first place. But for the video purposes, trying to do it a bit clearer by doing it on the drive. But now I've just got to get to work, cutting the lavender back, cutting these bushes back, so I'll sit flat against the floor. Okay, with a little bit of wiggling and jiggling, I managed to level the frame up, because you don't want like big gaps underneath it like I had on the opposite pole on this on the other side. Cleaned all of the debris around from the outside here. I'm not too worried about the leaves and things sitting on the inside of the coop, as the chickens like to go pecking at stuff on here. That was the one that was floating way up in the air, but I've lowered the ends down on there. Maybe it's sitting a little bit high, so a bit more wiggling and jiggling required on here. Now Time to put the 4 posts in on each of the corners. Okay, now the C-pillars, same thing again, squeezing both of the pins until they click down and through, ensuring they're through both sides. Two in, 2 to go. You are going to need a reasonably level surface. And the next step is to fit 4 of the end connectors, one into the end of each upright on there. Now looking back to the instruction manual, the end connectors, there's 6 of them in total, and they are these pieces here. So we're going to take 4 of those, fit them into our uprights. Now you need to pay careful attention on the orientation. You don't want them kind of going that way on there. That's definitely the wrong way because the tube's obviously pointing outwards. You want it going across like that because the next upright is going to be going across between the 2. So, not making life easy for myself. Holding all 4 tubes at once. Again, squeeze the buttons in, push that down till it locks inside both plates. And the next step is between those 4 end brackets. We're going to put 2 of the A pillars across. So, let's do that right now. Now, I've got 3 A pillars left, but just need 2 of them for this job. Now my 2 A pillars, one's going to go at this end between the uprights and one's going to go at the other end between the uprights. Nothing I've done so far would require 2 people to do this job. This is definitely something I would say you can assemble if you're a single parent on your own. On the videos where I do it and it does need somebody else to help you, see that clicks in like that, pay careful attention not to drop the other end. Okay, when it comes to putting the door bits in the E uprights, I'm going to be putting them on this side of the frame because that's where the entrance to my main coupe is, which become apparent. If the coupe entrance was the other side, obviously fit them on the other side. Hope that makes sense. Blindingly obvious, but worth explaining the details in these circumstances. So this button squeeze in again. For the second step of part 6, we're going to take 2 of the D rails and 1 of the end parts to build up the other half of the roof. So we've got our 2 straight D rails, 1 N rail on there. Handy having the coupe there so I can balance everything against it. Buttons in again there, making sure they're through. Again, pay attention, don't fit that with the rail going out, fit it with the rail going inwards. Squeeze the buttons in like that. You could always ease the assembly of this thing with a little bit of oil or grease on the tubes. Squeeze the buttons in. Once again, like the other side, I'm going to fit the whole thing before fitting it in to the end part of the frame. And it's cross drilled. It's got holes in all 4 sides on here, so if you fit the thing wrongly round the top or the bottom, you're still going to be able to fit it in, which is good attention to detail on the design of the thing. Now the bottom button has not clicked out, but I would like it to, because obviously that's where the 1 button is good, 2 buttons, a lot more strength in there. Next job, fit the A pole across the top. And as I say, step number 7 is add the A tube between the 2 top uprights. Okay, for step number 7, I'm going to put my A pole between the 2 uprights. Now you'll understand the importance of having both the poles facing inside. This shouldn't be too hard a job, but you're going to be able to be a reasonable height. I think it's 6.5 feet. Quotes to the top of this thing. Not needed to use the hammer at all so far, although I'm sure it will come into play at some point. Check both buttons are through. So now my Aleko chicken coop is beginning to take shape. Now to put the door in. And to do that, I'm going to need 2 F tubes, 4 clamps, 2 carriage bolts with nuts. Clamps, 12 pieces. Okay, now for this part of the job, you need 4 of the clamps, 2 of the bolts, but I notice 2 of the bolts and nuts, but I noticed 4 of the bolts are substantially bigger than the other 6 are. I was going to say I need to check the paperwork to see which ones we need, but then looking at these clamps here, these bolts with a bigger square go through those, and the smaller ones are the ones I need. So you need 4 of the clamps, 2 of the small bolts and small nuts, and 2 of the F poles, which would be these ones. Now at the start I said pay careful attention to the poles, because these look just like the F poles look just like the A poles, but the F poles have only got the linkages at the top, not at the bottom. In this case we want the linkages to go through each of the uprights here, and then we're going to clamp them in place at the bottom. So first of all, let's get that one in place. As I say, there is nothing on here that would stop a single parent or person on their own assembling this thing. A little bit of twist in the frame, but that's probably to do with my positioning it out on the ground on there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. Now at this stage I've got my spanner, or you could use a pair of mold grips or pliers, but I managed to find a suitable spanner. But the one thing I would say is when putting the brackets around the bottom here, you don't necessarily want to clamp it, and that's because you're going to need to ensure the uprights are somewhat parallel to each other on there, so you might want a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm going to tighten them on the bottom, but I'm not going to fully tighten them until I've maybe got the tape measure across, and there's actually another upright coming in across the top of the door on there. Hope that makes sense. It recommends putting the bolt in from the outside and the nut on the inside, which I can kind of see, because then you wouldn't have any predators scratching at the nut, pulling that free. Okay, so I'm going to get that kind of finger tight on there, but that's still enough room that I can slide it in and out until we can get both of them absolutely parallel with each other. Hope that makes sense. So I'm going to fit the bolt through this side. You want to make sure the square fitting is through there before fitting the bolt on the other side, and you should be able to pretty much just tighten that up by hand until the thing grips itself. You don't need any kind of grip this side because the bolt holds itself in from this side, hence you only need to be tightening with the spanner on the one side on there. Now it's fighting against me a little bit, it's wanting to pull this way, but a little bit of wiggling and jiggling did with these things. So as I say, leaving it finger tight, leaving it a little bit loose on there so I can move it around to make sure that my two uprights are parallel with each other. At this stage you could get the tape measure at the top and the bottom, make sure they're the same distance apart, and then tighten them up if you're worried about that. Speaking of which, do what you say, Rich, not what you do. Let's do exactly. Right. Before we tighten the bottom two brackets up there, the next thing I'm going to do is fit the J tube across the top, which fits over the joint between the two poles on here. I'm going to tighten that in place, then use my tape measure to measure the distance across there, then measure the distance across the bottom before moving the poles into place and tightening these two brackets, ensuring these poles are exactly parallel with each other. So one J pole, 4 sets of brackets, 2 bolts again. So we need another 4 brackets and 2 more of the small bolts and nuts. I'm blinding, obviously I need the pole marked J, which is considerably larger than the pole marked I, which is the remaining one down there. Okay, so I'm going to put the J pole across between the 2 posts here, but what they're recommending on the instructions is you do it pretty much around the joint on there on both sides. Excuse me if I get my fingers in the way when doing this on camera. This is not the easiest of things. This part of the job would be easier with 2 people, but as I'm demonstrating, 1 person can do it. So put the nut on there. My chickens are most intrigued as to what the heck their daddy is building. So we get that one finger tight again, taking care to ensure this is in, because with this in, it enables you to tighten the nut up without any worries. Pick the other 2 halves up, fit them round. Now that's dropped down, I can feel that's just dropped down at the other end on that, so I'm going to need to adjust that before I tighten everything up. Again, squeeze that in until you see there's 4 sides in it. That pushes home in there. Now you can tighten the nut up on the other side again. As long as you're keeping the pressure on the bolt, you can tighten the nut up to your heart's content. You're going to need to do a little bit tighter this time to stop it dropping down. Yeah, you see that's dropped down below the joint on there, so I'm going to have to release the bolt a bit. Oh, now I'm going to fully tighten both of these bolts, measure the distance between those 2 uprights, and then slide the bottom ones in to the same distance. So coming around this side now, this is actually, I've actually had adjustable spanner earlier, but if you've got a set of these wrenches, they'll make your life much easier. You can go fairly tight on these bolts because you have to bear in mind strength you're building into it is going to help keep any predators out, so you don't want it too loose. Okay, with my top upright now in place for the door frame, I'm going to measure between the 2 pillars, and we've got pretty much spot on 23 inches between the 2 uprights on here. So now at the bottom, I'm going to measure that and we're not bad on that. Well, that's on 23 inches, and I'm feeling fairly confident on clamping the bottom nuts up on both of these sides. Okay, so that is now my door frame fully bolted in on there. If you've not got a tape measure, don't worry too much. It's the kind of job you can do by eye. You need to ensure roughly the sides of the frame are parallel. They're not sloping, one's not sloping in too much, there's not sloping out too much. You want them roughly parallel like you would expect with a normal house doorway. Anyway, let me assemble that door. And now we need to assemble the gate frame. For that we need one G tube, one H tube, which is those two, one G, one H on there, an I tube, which is the little one on the side there, the tube with 4 clamps and 2 carriage bolts with nuts. Now the parts are labelled G and H, simply slotting together like that. They don't have any buttons or anything in there to lock those together, so that's just a push fit on that. And part I, which is the remaining tube, is going to go across the bottom here and put that at an angle because it's going to roll down my driveway. And we need the remaining 4 clamps and the remaining 2 small bolts and 2 nuts. It appears that you fit this at the lowest part of the frame possible, one side on. Now I'm actually battling against the rain, although I live in Northern California. Putting the bolt on around the back of here, finger tight. Apologies for the camera angle on there. The main thing to ensure is the top of the bolt is pressed in, because then the square sides hold it in place, meaning you can turn the nut round without too much of a problem. Now I need to do the same the other side. Once again, make sure the bolt's pressed nice and squarely through. Gonna have to feel the bolt in blindfolded on there. Now there is going to be something you're going to need to pay attention to when tightening these 2 bolts, is exactly that. You're going to need to push this frame together. Now that might be something that would be easier done by 2 people, but yours truly has just figured out a much better way of doing it. Stand it upright, and then we're going to get our spanner on here and tighten this one up. So let's do that right now. Okay, so with it upright, and you want the bracket roughly level with the bottom of the pole, I'm going to tighten that in a little bit more in there. So that's gripping. Slide this one back up, push that in. Now with your foot, I've got my foot on the bottom of this. What I'd recommend is you lean it against something. Lean it against the trampoline here. So we're squeezing the 2 bars together tight as possible, because you're not just clamping this bar against the upright, you're also clamping it against the horizontal part on here. Hope that makes sense on here. So you want to be pushing this bar, so this is not like easing out like that. You want it tight as can be against there. You also want it flush as can be against the top on there. That way it's going to be reasonably square when we actually fit it into the frame. Hope now I would again say make sure these bolts are nice and tight, because this is where the strength to your coupe is being built in. Okay, that one's tight this side. You see that sliding out there, so don't go tightening this up now. Turn it around the other way, so that's level. Slide that in again there, hard up against it. Now tighten this bolt. So in tightening it with it pushed up hard against there, you're ensuring both of the ends butted up firmly on here, and I think it's going to be parallel, and then you're going to stand a fighting chance when it comes to actually fitting the door. As I say, you're building the strength in here, so make sure that's nice and tight. So both ends of the flanges on there, roughly parallel on there. Poles shoved together, so that thing is as tight as can be on there. So that should mean both sides of the frame are roughly parallel. So that is step 10 complete. Step 11, install the gate. Stage, we've got relatively few bits remaining other than our netting to install at the last minute. These are our hinges, the class is male and female. Not sure there's any difference between the 2 on there, and I'm assuming that is our gate lock on here. The remaining 4 bolts, as I say, fit through the bigger apertures in here. Is that meant to fall out? Let's find out in a second. Now step 11, installing the gate itself. Gather the male and female hinges. Yep, done that. My 4 carriage bolts and nuts. Install the upper and lower female hinges. Position the gate in the gate opening. Hang on. Which way should they be, up and down on here? Very careful attention needed at this point, and you will need microscopic eyes to look on here. On the top one, you're going to need the female bit to be like that. The bottom one, you're going to need the female bit to be like that. Blinding obvious, Rich, what are you talking about? But you're going to need the male hinge to come up rather than down, in order to take the weight of the gate to stop the thing simply sliding down onto the ground on air. So you fit both of the female hinges to the gate rather than the gate surround, but the male hinges, one that goes from the bottom and the one at the top comes in from above. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so before going anywhere near the coupe, I have tightened both the female bracket at the top and the female bracket at the bottom onto the door frame itself. You want to make sure roughly they're in line with the frame. You don't want the bracket too tilted one way, too tilted the other way. It needs to be roughly flat with the frame. So looking at that from the end on, it's not too bad. So let's tighten that. Do the same at the bottom, and our gate is now pretty much ready to attach to our frame. As I say, this one, the male one, drops in from the top on this side. So I'm going to screw it to the frame. That's going to be just literally controlling the top, but you want the bottom one on here that's going to slide in like that, because that is going to be taking the weight of the gate on the hinge. Top one coming in like that is going to be stopping any predators. So now are we beginning to see how this comes together? The male frame, this is literally going to slot on like that. So that one's going to attach somewhere up near the top there. The bottom one, to stop the frame from dropping down, now you'll see where the bottom bracket needs to be fitted upright on there. So that one is then going to go in like that and hold the whole door up off of the ground. So you're not going to want too much of a gap at either end to keep predators out. So I'm thinking that is good. I'm now actually going to release this, he says, out of the way, because you obviously need to tighten this bottom bracket up as firm as can be before fitting the top one, because this is going to take the whole weight of the door frame on there. Anybody's got any questions, please fire away in the comment section below the video. As I said, trying to keep my hands out of the way as much as possible, but sometimes it is just about impossible unless you actually got somebody watching over your shoulder on your iPhone, seeing where you're filming, etc. I kind of do these videos every now and again thinking, will anyone ever watch them? And then the feedback in general people give is, yeah, Richie, keep making the things. Might make a career out of it one day. Right after, if this virus keeps up any longer. That top bracket battling against me, definitely cued for some child unfriendly language. Then this would be a lot easier with a nut wrench like I was using for the other one, but I just haven't got a big enough one. Now you need this bottom bracket, needs to be super tight, because this is going to be taking the full weight door hanging down on it. The top bracket is purely going to be for security. My chickens are most intrigued as to what the heck I'm building around them. Lean your body weight into that. That's not moving down anywhere in a hurry, Richie. Okay. Now that top clamp, which was the one that was nearly a cause for a lot of swearing. Now just check the gap top and bottom on your door. You're not going to be getting too big a gap at the bottom on there. Now, despite having struggled to tighten that up, I'm actually going to drop that bottom hinge down by 1/2 inch to close the gap, because most predators from my chickens are going to come from underneath as opposed to the gap on the top there. Okay, so I've actually rehung that lower down to minimize the gap any predators getting through there. Now for the top one, the top male hinge drops down like that. Okay, so the bottom one is the one that's the important one. That's taking all of the weight, but likewise this needs doing at the top for any strength any animals trying to bash into there whatsoever. Last bit of the job before I put the netting on, fitting this last male bracket to the top. So you want to make sure it's square with the door. Spin it home tight by hand, squeeze it in, fingers, stops it fighting so hard. Then I'm going to tighten that up. Okay, coop is coming together on the chicken run on there. Door, all I need to do, that's the hinges done. All I need to do now is fit the locking mechanism on there and all the netting. Well, when it comes to the final part of step 11, installing the gate, the last bit I've got to do is to install the latch. Okay, so when it comes to fitting the bracket to lock your door, it needs to be facing this way up with a thick bit towards the top. Do not fit it with these holes towards the bottom, otherwise this hinge will open and your chickens will walk out and be exposed to every predator going. Now you want for maximum strength, roughly halfway between the two. You're going to take this bracket, slide that round there. Going to tighten the two nuts roughly finger tight. Sorry, I was running out of place. Just bits like that, it would be too handy to have somebody hand you the nut, but it's not. When I'm going to tighten them, what I do is make sure this bracket is nice and tight, because this is what's stopping this door opening. The bracket, oh no, it doesn't work. Of course it does, Rich. You turn it upright like that, slide it over, drops down. That is not going anywhere in a hurry. The way to open it, you push it up, you twist it round. The door is now going to open with ease. It's also going to lock pretty much instantly. The only thing to do is to make sure it is down as you leave the chicken coop on there. All we've got to sort out is the chicken wire, and that may be a whole job in itself. But thumbs up if you like the video so far. Comedy moment from the day. Why didn't I just walk through that rather than opening it? Crazy. Anyway, the one thing the kit doesn't come with is any anchors to tie the frame to the ground. But anyway, I've got a few ideas as to what I might put around the outside of this to stop anything from digging under that. The chickens are going to be locked away in the coop at night. This is just as purely a secondary level of defense on it. The final step is to add the wire mesh, which I've got the 2 rolls of down here. Decent set of wire cutters. Now, it's one thing in the instructions it doesn't mention. It shows the tools. It doesn't show any wire cutters on there, but you are going to need a fairly decent pair of wire cutters to cut through that mesh. Now, what they recommend is we're going to tie the first part of the wire on at part 1 here. First bit I'm going to do, I'm going to go right the way over the roof. Second step is I'm going to do part 2, which is the back wall, which is going to require 1 piece, and then you're going to require 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces for the front with the door in there. Attaching every 20 centimeters with a cable tie on there. That will make more sense when I show you in practicality. Now, this is my finished Aleko chicken run on here with the wire on, with the cover on the roof. I'm going to show you part of how I went about fitting the wire to the chicken coop, but not the whole thing, as the camera angles weren't great, they weren't ideal, but I'll talk through the main principles of it. Basically, you attach the wire at one end, pull it up, attach it over this bar, attach it onto the sides, pull the wire over the top, attaching one side on, pulling it up at the same time. Then you pull the other side up, attaching it on at the same time, then attach it to the top rail using the Ziploc ties. The one thing I would say is buy some other Ziploc ties, do exactly the same down the other side, and bring the wire down to the front. You are going to need some wire cutters in order to trim the end of the wire. Once you've got the roof and the end sections on, you're then going to take your roll of wire again, fasten it at this end, stretch it out down to that end, cable tie on, cut it off at that end, then you're going to get your cable ties, fasten it on here, and only then trim it to size to make sure you get it right, because you've only just got enough wire. And this video is very hard to make with my little friends here coming to see what I'm doing. Down on this side to finish up, again, you're going to need the wire cutters. What I would recommend, again, attach it on one side, stretch it out onto here, put the Ziploc ties all the way around before trimming it on there. Now, you will need to leave it a little bit longer to come over the gap in the edges of the door. You're also going to need another piece for that top piece on there and a separate piece for the door. So I hope that little bit of practical guidance as to how to attach the wire to the coop helped out. This purple roofing cover I would highly recommend attaching. Keeps the rain out, keeps the chickens dry if it's pouring down. Very, very easy to attach indeed with these toggles. I can't show you how to do that, as my wife simply went and put this up in about 2 minutes flat when I was inside. Well, anyhow, that concludes the assembly and review of my Aleko chicken coop. It's been up now for a couple of months. It seems fairly durable, particularly liking the rain cover on the top there, and my chickens are absolutely loving the extra space, aren't you there, girls? Anyway, if you like this video, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching from me and my girls. Well, thumbs up if you like this video, guys. Post any comments you might have in the comment section below the video, and hit the circle below to subscribe. And if you do hit the circle, don't forget to hit the bell.